Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFirio, and I am the host of the show. I've been doing this for 7 years now, and I've loved welcoming all of you to the show over the course of these last years. I really hope that it has been beneficial. If you're new to the show, welcome. Thank you so much for taking your time and investing it into these episodes. I think you're going to get a lot from them. These Founder Friday episodes, the one that we're doing today, is one of the most loved features of the show. We tell the stories of entrepreneurs, and those stories are rich and adventurous, and there's ups and downs, a lot of drama, sometimes not a lot of drama, but there's a lot of lessons learned, because coffee is people, and the story of people doing things is a great story to hear. And it's even more appropriate, very meta, that we're going to be talking about Story Coffee Company today with Don Niemyer, who is the founder of that company. So yeah, it's really a great episode. I'm glad you're here for it. Now, part of this episode, we're going to be talking about the key holder coaching groups, because Don was one of the inaugural members of that group. And he had so much wisdom to share and received a lot of wisdom in return from the members. We're going to talk about it toward the end of the show. And that is a cohort of people. If you want to know what key holder coaching groups are, 6 to 7 people in each cohort that are coffee shop owners who are, in business, but wanting community for the purpose of accountability, inspiration, insights, to help each other and to be helped as they build through the ups and downs, through the victories. It is a lonely place to be an owner. There's not a lot of people to talk to, but doing these groups has been so rewarding, not only for the group members, but also for myself. And so if you're interested in something like that, if you want to be considered for the next round of key holder coaching groups, then go ahead and email chris@keys-to-the-shop.com. I'll put you on a list. We'll just have a conversation and talk about it. It's a paid mastermind group, basically, this cohort, and it is 6 months. We meet for 2 hours every other week. So that's like 12 2-hour sessions, and it really is a lot of fun. It's very practical. And we also talk a lot between the sessions on our circle community in the Keys to the Shop, where I say Keys Key Holder Coaching Group. So anyway, reach out, chris@keys-to-the-shop.com, if you want to be a part of that community. We're doing great things, and you can be a part of it too. So if you have ever tasted coffee and thought, I wonder if this can be better, then you're not alone, because I think, that's what the people at Ground Control were after. They've reached the next level with their technology. Go to groundcontrol.coffee, today's sponsor of the show, and check them out. The original Cyclops brewer, award-winning. It elevated the quality of batch brew coffee beyond where we thought it could go. You also have the technology there that allows you to make batched iced lattes and batched cold brew, because the extraction technology allows you to make espresso concentrate in batches as well as cold brew concentrate. And so this opens up a lot of efficiencies and profitability for your coffee shop. Follow that curiosity to better coffee. Groundcontrol.coffee. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Barista series from Pacific. So Pacific is a company that has invested a ton into the coffee community. The Barista series has been present at so many competitions, throwdowns, and has invested an incredible amount into not only supporting the community, but also in how they produce the product itself. The Barista series stands up to the heat from steaming, produces amazing texture for latte art, just great milk texture, or alternative milk texture, if you will. And also the balance of the beverage's flavor focuses on the coffee. So that means your customers get a wonderful experience, but that's because they've designed it for baristas and it's been tested by baristas. So you get something that works, and it works well. So go to pacificfoodservice.com, check them out for yourself, taste it, and see what you think. think you'll be really impressed by it. And they would love to just, talk with you and support you in the way that they have always done. So if you're looking for the best plant-based beverage for your customers, check out the Barista series from Pacific. All right, everybody. Well, today we are in for a treat because we are going to learn the story. We're going to hear the story of Story Coffee Company in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Don Niemyer is somebody who I think is been around, and I mean like literally in terms of how they started. They went with their two daughters and moved into a 99 square foot Volkswagen Rialta, lived in it for 4 years, and traveled the nation visiting coffee shops, getting insights and inspiration. And they had a dream to open their own place. And in 2015, they built and opened a tiny house coffee shop. And before this, Don had been already a coffee shop owner for a bit, and had been part of the barista and coffee community. And this road trip, though, really began the story of Story Coffee Company. And from this adventure, they worked to deliver this expression of coffee, this minimalist, tiny house coffee shop, Story Coffee Company. And they worked with Robin Paisley of Paisley Commercial Interiors to create the design. It was actually called the most beautiful coffee shop in Colorado by the Architectural Digest magazine. So that's pretty awesome. Now Don has a couple of shops, and they're doing great. And Story Coffee Company has been featured in other national publications such as Fresh Cup and Barista Magazine, where they detailed their adventures of that Volkswagen Rialta coffee tour adventure. And so that was pretty cool. And Don and Carissa are both constantly chasing the idea that there is this practice of simplicity, and that's kind of like their pursuit. Like let's pursue having a fulfilling coffee shop experience for both ourselves and our staff and our customers, but let's use simplicity as the cornerstone of that. And so today we're going to talk about how that works in principle, as a principle in their business and in their lives. Don, I mentioned, is also a member of the inaugural group of people who have been in the Keyholder coaching group. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today as well, because that's part of the story too. As you'll see, we went to the beginning of the story and talked about how Don's mentorship from other people and in the industry shaped what he decided to do with Story, and then how even most recently, many years into his career and business, community and mentorship still plays a role. And so we're going to learn a lot about simplicity, managing one's own pursuits as an owner. Don is a great guy, a ton of great wisdom. I love hearing his insights, and I think you will as well. So let's get right to it. Let's hear the story of Story Coffee Company right now with Don Niemyer. Hey, Don, welcome to Keys to the Shop. How are you?
I'm great, Chris. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I am really just the story of story. I like how it sounds.
Yeah.
I've gotten to talk with you a lot because you're one of you are one of the inaugural members of the Keyholder coaching group. You are part of our first cohort of coffee shop owners in that group. So I've gotten to really get to know your story and journey in leadership in the coffee shop operations. And so I'm even more excited to get to dig into this for the Keys to the Shop audience's sake. Um, so why don't we just kind of start, of course, like stories do, from the beginning of
Yeah.
Don's journey into specialty coffee and how you decided that, oh, I should have my own business too. I should not just work in coffee. I should like own this coffee thing. How did this
Yeah.
happen?
How did this happen? The question, what's the story of story, is one that I get all the time. And I love it. I love being asked that. Like a lot of stories, I've got shorter versions and longer versions. I'll give you kind of the medium, and you can pull any threads you want to from there. But I had a whole career in my, 20s, and somewhere around the age of 30, I kind of wanted to look around and do something different. And so I got a job at Starbucks, like a lot of people, and that's where I fell in love with coffee and the human, interactions and that kind of thing. Got married, and then my wife and I were like, we're going to go somewhere. We were in Colorado Springs at the time.
Yeah.
We're going to go somewhere and do something different. So we decided on Portland, Oregon. So we moved out to Portland, Oregon, and ended up owning 3 different coffee shops out there. Part of that was facilitated by the fact that I kept getting fired from jobs that I was working at for corporate America. As it turns out, I'm not a real good corporate, guy. In every case, I thought I was doing something good and solving problems, and they were like, "Yeah, but you're not following all the rules." I'm like, "Oh, your rules are stupid," and they were like, "Yeah, that doesn't work that way. You can't be here anymore." So I found myself. We had bought a little coffee kiosk there in Portland, and I found myself being that was my only sustenance. Now I had to support my family on this, so we threw in with Stumptown Coffee, and started going to every training that they would offer, and put ourselves in every environment where we could to learn anything we could going into it. And over time, we ended up owning 3 shops there in Portland. But then I had these 2 little girls, these 2 daughters that were growing up, and we were a long ways from family. So we decided we wanted to go back, towards where we were from, and ended up coming back to Colorado. But we thought, hey, between Oregon and Colorado, what we can do is take a little time, and we won't have jobs. We'll sell our shops, and we'll have a little bit of money in the bank, and we'll take some time and just kind of see what's out there and dream about what we might want to do next. So that idea led to us getting a little RV, the Volkswagen Rialta, and it's about 100 square feet. So it's kind of a big van, but not a full sized RV. But it was enough for us, and we stayed the night in front of our apartment one night, and thought, this is cool. We could just move into this thing, and we could just do this. Yeah. So we had sold, by that time we had sold 2 of our 3 shops, and we had the 3rd one on the market, and we're like, this 3rd one sells, we'll be ready to go. So we moved into the RV, put all of our worldly possessions out in our yard, and had a yard sale. That was a sober moment when I realized the entirety of my world possessions was worth $800. But we sold everything, simplified down to just what we could put in the RV, and waited for that 3rd shop to sell so we could take off and kind of crawl around the nation, visiting coffee shops and dreaming. And what happened right after that was we got into a little bit of a spat with our neighbors, which was a Subway. And we had a drive-through at our coffee shop for 18 years. It was, had been there a long time. But somebody bought the Subway, and they started complaining that our customers were driving across their property. I didn't know this at the time, but the property line was such that you could not get to that drive-through without driving across their property. So I was super confused. I'm like, what are you talking about? Yeah. We showed up to work one morning, and they had erected a fence across our drive-through. And so, pandemonium breaks out, and our customers are having to back out, and everybody's confused. And we realized we can't sell this shop in this state. We've got to figure this out before we can put it on the market. And Chris, that's how we became what I call accidental minimalists. We ended up living on the streets of Portland in that little RV for about 2 years while we cracked that nut and figured things out. Meanwhile, we're still running a business. My wife was a doula. She's going to births, and we were dropping my kids off at school. And we spent, 2 years. But here's the thing. We loved it. It was hilarious. It was, we were learning so much. We found that, anybody that kind of starts off on the path of simplicity and minimalism will tell you this, that what you find out is you need far less than you thought you needed, and we were just really enjoying, learning those lessons and experiencing that, and so that went on until we finally did sell the shop. We took off on our national coffee crawl, which we called the Rialta Coffee Tour. That was what the RV was named, the Rialta, so we called it the Rialta Coffee Tour.
What year was this?
This was 2014.
Okay.
So reached out to Barista Magazine and my friend Sarah Allen there, and she invited me to kind of do some writing about what we were experiencing. And we were walking into coffee shops, and we ended up doing that for about a year, all told. Wrote a series for Barista Magazine called, the Rialta Coffee Tour.
I remember this,
judging some coffee competitions here and there, and just dreaming. And believe it or not, I am trying to answer your question. So we were dreaming with this background. What are we going to do when we get to Colorado? We weren't sure. So we would walk into one of these palatial coffee shops, like a barista parlor in Nashville
Yeah.
or Sight Glass in Minneapolis or whatever. That we were like, oh man, look at this. This is really something like we want to do. Man, we were going to do something big and awesome. And then the next shop we'd walk into would be something like a coffee cart, not just coffee in Charlotte, or the Tandem Roasting Cafe in Burlington, Vermont, or whatever. And there'd just be one person in a little espresso machine just doing great work and really passionate. We're like, oh, that's who we are. We're going to be simple. We're going to keep it simple. Well, these two ideas, we want to build something compelling and excellent alongside the idea, but we want to keep it simple. That converged in the idea of a tiny house. So the tiny house community was building houses that were built well. They were built out of typical historically used construction methods, 2x4s and drywall and whatnot.
Yeah.
So something valuable that would last, but it was just little. And we said, that's what we're going to do. So we got the idea, built a tiny house, didn't know what we were going to do with it. We have figured if we built something beautiful and compelling, somebody would invite us to the dance, so to speak. And the people that invited us turned out to be the city of Colorado Springs. So we sit now in the downtown, kind of like the Colorado Springs living room. It's where all the parades and the protests and everything happens, and it's called Acacia Park. And we literally are set up for it'll be 9 years this year. Wow. In November that we've been sitting there with our tiny house coffee shop. So hopefully somewhere in there answered your question. That's how we got into where we are today.
I love it. So let me go back a little bit here and ask about your processing of selling the three shops. And as you kind of go through the idea that you need less than you think you need, there's the physical stuff. We're all familiar with Marie Kondo, and we want to clean out our closets and all that stuff. But then there's something mental going on here as well, where you had three of these things, and now you don't. And when you have a business, and you came from the world of business before coffee, a lot of your identity gets wrapped up in those locations, in the menu, and everything else. Letting go of an old shirt is maybe not as difficult as letting go of an entire business. And I'm curious how you processed, or you both processed that, and entered into this new story, this new chapter of the story, with a different perspective, and what that perspective was as a result of having to let go of that.
Yeah, I guess I'd say it's like everything in life. Your life is driven by hope, and if you have hope for something in your future, then you have something to chase and to look forward to, and you can take the principles that you've learned and the relationships that you've built. But we are, as a species, we're incredibly hopeful people. There are surveys where they talk about people even in the most dire circumstances, they believe something better is going to happen. It's, of course, not everybody every time, but as a species, we generally believe things are going to be better. So for us, letting go of the old was part of that hopeful process of believing for something better in the future. And of course, we had some ideas. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do, but if you believe you're moving towards something that you're excited about, then letting go of something that you already have is a lot easier. I do think my DNA is kind of set up to where like it's easier for me to let go of stuff. I'm not sure where that exactly come from. Um, I've I've always been the kind of person that like hadn't had a great amount of value for stuff. So for me, it was a little easier than for some. I'm not sure, but I think the key is always having that idea that I'm letting go of this to trade it in for something in my future that I'm gonna, believe is, better or in different ways beautiful.
What is that better? Let me say there's this amorphous better, like I know that we're going to do something after we sell these coffee shops and something is going to turn up, is it just like this giant question mark that fills itself in, or is that hope based on the evidence that something is emerging and you kind of know what it is, but you're gonna get more in focus as you pursue it?
Yeah, I mean, you're us entrepreneurs all have this deep within us, right? Like we're betting on ourselves, right? We believe
Mm-hmm.
that we are going to find it, like we got that sense of adventure and that sense of entrepreneurship. And we're like, I'm not sure what's around that corner, but man, I'm going to go out there. That's what's driven everything from, world exploration, space exploration, all these grand ideas. Like we don't know what's out there, but we're going to go figure it out. And so, yeah, I think when you have that sense, and I know the listeners to this, to your show are like that. They're like, we're going to bet on ourselves and we're going to go out there, and we're going to chase something down, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to be great. The trickier thing for me and for a lot of us is, um, you know, not just letting it be, a pipe dream. Like we got to put some practical skills, and we got to do our homework, right?
Yeah.
You got to have that business plan, and you got to have that budget, and you got to have some bricks that are in place to build that wall that are more than just, I bet this will turn out great, so we're going to go for it, kind of a thing.
I think that you hit the nail on the head there, especially around skills. And one of the things that Colin Harmon is famous for saying in his book, What I Know About Running Coffee Shops, is something that a lot of us are like, yeah, that would be a great idea, to work in a coffee shop before you open one, when and if you can. And I mean, I just before we recorded this was talking to somebody who wants to do a drive-through kind of model of cafe. Um, and the advice at this stage for them was, you should probably try to become a barista for a brief period of time to internalize that. Even if it's not a great shop, you can still learn a lot more from skills that you develop just being saturated. You are saturated in coffee. You were in Portland. You owned three coffee shops. You did this, and it became part of you. So I imagine some of that, the intuition that it's going to work out, is also based on the idea that you've been mentored by the industry and by people in the industry to kind of intuit where you are in this space and where you can go. Talk a little bit about the importance of the experience that you acquired and what that did for the success of Story.
Well, first of all, like I said, I'll back up one notch behind that. There are a lot of different paths. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways you can get to any number of places. But for me, like I said, I spent 3.5 years at Starbucks, and I'm not a Starbucks hater. Like they taught me so many amazing
Yeah.
practical things that they had, through decades of doing the work. Like everything from how to set up a bleach bucket to proper pastry handling, or things like that you just wouldn't know if you didn't have that experience. So that experience for me was absolutely invaluable. And then the other thing for us is the next thing we did is we started off small. Our first shop that we owned was a kiosk, and it was kind of a walk-up situation. Anybody that's been to Portland, Oregon, has probably ridden the light rail, and they have on the light rail, they have these hubs with these little brick buildings where you can get a coffee. So we took over one of those. And so it wasn't the big palace of coffee that we started off with. The point is, we started off with pretty low stakes where I called it my laboratory. This is where I'm going to learn. This is where I'm going to figure things out. And continued, every lesson you learn, every tool you learn about, you put that in your pocket and you carry it with you to the future. And then
Hmm.
the other thing is just the absolute critical value. People say, oh, you were lucky you got to work with, Stumptown. And, there's some luck to that, but you go out and you find that in an age, and everybody knows this, in an age where everything's on YouTube. I mean, even if you're in the middle of nowhere out in the rural sticks, which is where I grew up, you still have access to great training, um, and and information. But yeah, put yourself in those environments where you can rub shoulders with people who have been there, done that, and can have something to teach you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And it's the advice that people give of musicians is learn the standards, learn other people's music in some ways, you know? And then you can be a better what's the word? Improviser with that. You can do that stuff with skill because you've been uh mentored under what's already out there. So the unique aspect of your business is actually unique and not just a guess at being unique. So now that you had uh, learned in this school of coffee, that of coffee shop ownership and working at Starbucks, when you launch this tiny home, what is the thing that sets you apart, aside of course from the fact that this is a tiny home and it's fun to have a coffee shop in a tiny in a tiny
It
home.
is.
uh, Talk about how you position yourself in the market to deliver the experience that I think people would hope something that novel would deliver.
Yeah, simplicity.
Mm.
Simplicity is everything. Like, and I have this conversation a lot. If I say more than what I just said, simplicity, then it gets complicated, which I will do. But I'm aware that by unpacking the idea of simplicity, you make it less simple. But people can start drawing their own ideas about. We're trying to keep things. Let's just go back to basic science. You're trying to achieve a particular outcome. The more variables you put on the process to achieve that outcome, the more difficult it's going to be to choose that to achieve that outcome and to do it repeatedly with great consistency.
Yeah.
And I just described the goal of coffee, right? Like you don't want to be able to make an amazing cup of coffee once. You need to be able to make it dozens or hundreds of times a day, day after day after day. And then eventually you need to be able to develop protocols and procedures that you can have other people step into, and they can do that with great repeatability. So for us, I'm not I'm not um, a hater of all of the experimentation that goes on. Everything. I'm grateful for those people that are on the front lines figuring out, all kinds of minutia and idiosyncrasy, all those things. For us, we want to take the best that we have access to, and we want to keep that as simple as we possibly can. So it's a simplicity in our menu, simplicity in our equipment, simplicity in our rotation. One of the things, a great example is a lot of people like to rotate that espresso. Today we're doing a single origin Guatemala. Tomorrow it's a blend. The different things. Hats off to you guys. Like, thank you for doing that. Not me. I have the same espresso all the time. It's aged, within a window, and we want to be able to count on using that espresso to make a desired outcome over and over and over and over.
Yeah.
Being in the tiny house, you can draw that parallel back to living in the RV. When you set up a tiny, and a lot of people have done this, whether it's maybe not a tiny house, but like a small operation, you have built-in constraints, right? And you have to work within those constraints.
Mm.
So even if I wanted to have a bay of 4 grinders with 4 different coffees, I can't do that because I don't have room to do that, so I've got to make choices and decisions. If I wanted to expand my menu and be serving, cheeseburgers and, you know, pie or whatever, that's not an option for me. I don't have a kitchen in my little tiny house, so those constraints kind of force you to work with focus. Hopefully, it's one of the things that we like to say is it's important to configure your life in such a way as that your values happen automatically where you
Yes.
can. So if you love hiking in the Rocky Mountains, you need to live in Colorado, right? Because that's going to be hard for that to happen if you live in Oklahoma, where I grew up. So I love spending, time with my kids outdoors. So I live in a place where the outdoors call me. So that happens more automatically than if I had to take a, 1 week vacation every year, and you could just apply that, in a million ways. But back to coffee, if you build in some constraints, whether it's space or whatever, this is how we're going to do things. Those constraints can lead you to a more simple way of operating, which one of my messages is it's the simplicity that can yield those consistent results that we're, hoping we'll get.
It's very interesting. I imagine there is something to be said for what you save in terms of energy that allows you a more deep experience with what you do have. Because a lot of people get involved in coffee with the idea that they want to form something that is, it kind of transcends them, or there's something deeper there. Do something for the community and this kind of thing. But then the game is all about they acquire more and more and more. The menu gets larger, the staff gets more numerous, and it becomes this real tangled mess. You know, sometimes maybe there's a good reason for a lot of that. But I have found that often it's not that you needed it, but it's the thought that it is automatically assumed that it is what leads to success. And the pursuit of simplicity sounds in those situations very scary because there's the fear of missing out. The fear the guy who invented the term I heard said that his actual favorite term was FOBO, which was fear of the better option. And so you just get all the options. We're
Yeah.
going to have every kind of structure, every kind of menu item. And so the constraints part is huge. And I imagine your values offer maybe one of the first expressions of constraint, um, besides whatever physical location you have. How does that offer sort of a guiding light to things you say yes to and how things you say no to?
Oh, you nailed it. It's all about values. It's all about, starting with why, you want to have this. Why do you want to have this?
Mm,
I'm thinking about doing this. Let's go back to your values, the things that you said you believe, the things that you said you valued. Um, and that's a tricky tightrope to walk, but the effort towards it and the endeavor towards it is, I think it's just huge. For us, one of the things that happened in our story was we ended up opening a second location, and people used to come in and say, "Oh, you got this little tiny house." That it kind of entertains me to remember people walk in and say, "Are you thinking about maybe having a real coffee shop sometime?" And I wouldn't say it, but I think as opposed to this imaginary one that you're standing in right now with me handing you a cup of coffee. But the idea was, are you going to do something, another location? And I would always say the same thing. I would say, I hope not, but I've been around long enough to know that I should never say never, because you never know what's going to come around the next corner.
yeah.
Well, in our case, we were not planning on opening another location, but some friends that bought a beautiful old building, and they're architects, and they had this dream to do something amazing for this part of the city that was underserved as far as great coffee goes. And the city's kind of coming this direction, and like we want to do something for the city. And I was like, oh no, I'm not. We're not. Oh, I don't know what you have in mind. Tell me a little bit more. And the next thing you know, it's like, oh, these things are matching up with our values. This is the way. You only get. Everybody knows this, right? You only get so many hours and weeks and days, in years on this planet. What are you going to spend your time doing? And everybody that's paying attention knows chasing another dollar is a bad answer to that question. We need money to pay our bills and eat and stuff. But like, I just want, well, if I do this, people would say, you should have a drive through, you can make more money. And I always say, I'm not trying to make more money, I'm trying to spend my life doing what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
Like, I can get by with the money I've got. So for us, it wasn't about the next location wasn't about, can we make more money? It was about, what story is being told about this part of the city for this time, for these people, and does that match our values? And that's what led us to opening up a second location. It was all about this. We can't say no to this. This is who we said we are. We got to do it.
So this minimalist simplicity, it's not just about saying no to things, because
Oh no.
you could be just beholden and handcuffed by your values to overlook some really good opportunities, as this second location was, because you were just more dogmatic than you were considerate, or you didn't really think about it and say no. You just like automatically say no, simple, and that's not simple. So
Yeah.
uh, when you think about expanding from one location to a second location and having staff, to join you in this. Now, we're talking so far about some very personal values that you have. How important is it that those values are also shared by your baristas, managers, and what kind of work went into and still goes into um, managing people involved in making all of this happen?
Great question. That became the question for me recently. Let me go back and touch one thing.
Hmm.
The idea of simplicity, you said it's not just about saying no. And we like to flip that around and say simplicity is only about saying yes. What am I going to say yes to? Somebody taught me a long time ago, you don't want to think of your life in terms of what you hate. You want to think of your life in terms of what you love.
Okay.
Like, what do I love? Which I don't know. I don't know. What your thought about turning this corner is, but I'm excited to talk about the Keyholders Group because the Keyholders Group found me in this dynamic moment of I want to say yes to these things, but the tools that I have developed and the skills that I've developed and my you know expertise that I have, which by the way was basically me, and I'm not bragging about this. I'm saying this is a dumb thing. Like my
Mm,
answer to every problem was me. I'll handle it. I'll solve it. I'll take care of it.
yeah, that's I think a lot of people nodding their head are going like, yeah, that's what I am right now.
Uh, and fine. That's good for a while, right?
Yeah.
Um, as you get older and as your responsibilities, I've got 4 kids now. My answer can't be me for every one of them every time. There's things that we have to say, hey, why don't one of you older ones watch this little one while I go with this one to that thing, that kind of a deal.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
you start to learn how to delegate and think in terms of empowering people. And this gets back to how do you um, instill your values in other people? Well, that's the question. And ultimately that's what we all, I don't know. That's one of the things that we all want to do on this planet, right? We don't just want to live in a box and go, I figured a bunch of stuff out. We want to share what we know and what we, have figured out, and how we are configuring our lives to make our values happen. We want to share that with others, right? First
Yeah.
of all, with our families, but then ultimately with our community, and in this case, our employees,
Hmm.
that type of thing. So that for me became the driving question.
Yeah. Let me just then we'll turn that corner then because I think it's appropriate. And it, one, I think the question of identity and the comfort of entering into a new phase is on a lot of people's minds who want their businesses to be a little bit more independent of them. But the shift is their usefulness within the business. And I've had this question asked before by clients. Well, what do I do? If I give up all the things that I've done, it's like instead of entering into a new chapter, it feels like you're killing off the main character. you know, it's not what's happening. So I like what you're talking about here with you're sharing with other people. You're doing what kind of we wanted to do with coffee. Like I want to share a cup of coffee with somebody. Well, in your case, in many people's case, the sharing the cup of coffee is the cup of coffee is knowledge. The cup of coffee is values or processes and training, and your wisdom is that cup of coffee for them, and then their cup of coffee literally is a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
So right. So talk a little bit about now you had Run Story, it's award winning, it's featured in a magazine, it's a beloved gem of your city. And now you, Don, have this intuition that's well developed to this point that, well, I need to move to the next chapter. And um, seems appropriate that you've wanted to get in community because that's how you started. You worked in coffee, you were mentored in coffee, and now how did keyholder coaching groups kind of fill that need at that time?
Yeah. So, like I said, key holders caught me at a super dynamic moment where I've opened the second location, and my answer to every problem is me. I'm seeing very quickly the limitations. The way I've come to describe this, I tell my staff all the time, I am the bottleneck. I want you to know that I know that everything's flowing to me, and I'm not able to do what I need to be doing, which is serving you and equipping you and empowering you and training you. By the way, this question, um, if I multiply, or how did you say it? Like if I hand responsibilities off to others, what will I do? Answering that question, in my opinion, is it's trying to get the right answer to the wrong question. This isn't, that's not what life's for, is figuring out how am I going to, um, occupy myself. Our mission statement, and everybody doesn't have to have the same mission statement, of course, but the idea, I think, is valuable. I don't want to say universally, but I think most people could appreciate this. But our mission statement articulates it this way: we want to multiply our influence. Our mission doesn't say we're going to make amazing coffee. Of course, we're going to make amazing coffee. We work so hard at that all the time, like everybody that's listening to this does. But beyond, we're thinking beyond that. Yes, we're going to make great coffee. Why? We're going to multiply our influence with one another, with our community, with our customers. We want to have an influence outside of just here's a great cup of coffee. So we want to have values and things that we think can be, obviously hospitality is a big part of the conversation. How can we be involved in people's lives in ways that are meaningful to them? Let's see. So you were coming back to the idea of key holders. So I was in the process of figuring out, how do I take these great values that I believe so deeply in, that I have worked hard my whole life to, find outlets for. How do I get other people on board with that? Yeah. And that's where the key holders group found me. As soon as I heard about it, I'm like, oh, I'm going to be a part of that, because I wanted to be in a cohort where I could, everything from, like, throw my wild idea out and have somebody go, oh yeah, we did that 5 years ago, and here's how it went. It'll go really well in these ways, but you want to watch out for this. Here's a pothole that you might drive into if you don't watch it. Just simply the work, because the way the group works, as you obviously know, is you have a moment where this is my moment to present what I'm going through and get feedback, right? Yeah. So just the work of knowing that somebody's going to be hearing me present my issue, doing the work to present that alone was gold nuggets, man, because you have to do all this work. Like, I'm going to be looking these people in the eyes and saying, here's what's going on. I got to do my work to, to have a meaningful presentation, right? And so that was valuable. And then, of course, getting their feedback was invaluable. And then there's another level of it, is just knowing that there's somebody else out there. We all know this. It's lonely at the top, right? Like, you're in my business, I'm surrounded by lovely people, talented people I adore. And yet they don't have the same responsibilities as me. So to be able to talk to other people who are like, yes, I have those same responsibilities. I know what it's like, and sometimes it's just like, Don, you're going to be okay. You can do it, Yeah. That encouragement. So there's just so many layers of value that the key holder group brought to me, figuring this stuff out and walking through this with me. It's a 6-month process. Mine was. And what I decided to do was latch onto the issue that you articulated. How do I multiply my values in these people? And I just relentlessly pounded that. I came at it 6 ways from Sunday, like every time it was my turn to talk, I'm like, okay, I want to talk about this same issue. I called it my mini revolution, because I'm revolutionizing the way we're doing things around here, And man, I have been handing off responsibilities and training people and equipping people. And I'll just give you one quick, I know I'm going a little long here, but I'll give you one quick example. Like, one of the things, one of the people in the key holder group, hi Sunny. She said, Don, and she talks with this passion. She's like, Don, you have to get very clear about what you do want to do and what you do not want to do. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to take that challenge, So for me, one of the things was food. We have a little bit of a food program here now at our second location. We have more space. So I've got somebody who has a culinary background. I have handed that thing off to her. I ask her weekly, what do you need from me? How can I resource you? How can I help you be better? And then I leave her alone, and she does a better job than I ever would be able to do, Yeah. And so this is one of the beautiful things, is watching people blossom in these different responsibilities. And, just to highlight it with my big yellow highlighter, my role then becomes caring for, in this case, relative to this specific example, I'm caring for her. I'm resourcing her. I'm making sure that she has what she needs for her to live her dream of like serving great food, and it's just, it's a beautiful, everybody who's a parent or a business owner, we've all had this experience of seeing people that are, kind of, I don't want to say below us, or but they're not as high on the totem, however you want to say that, right? They're not the owner of the business and you are. See them blossom and grow into responsibilities in ways that fulfills their dreams,
Yeah.
and you get to be a part of resourcing that. That's a whole other level of, living your values.
That's great, and I've loved Don's mini revolution, as we had, fond of saying, big revolution, but mini because tiny house, I suppose.
Yeah.
Uh, but the idea of what you're talking about makes such a big difference for business owners when they realize they have freedom beyond the initial, um, their initial. I don't want to say usefulness, but the satisfaction that one can draw from doing what you just described is not something you can experience without simply experiencing it, like
Yeah.
doing it, right? The hope that you had earlier described of, well, I think something around this corner is going to be really good. I mean, that's the corner again. You just turned a corner to delegate, to facilitate someone's success, to resource them. And I'm kind of curious about how that creates a blossoming in you as the owner. What does that do for you? I think you hinted at it here, but I wonder if you would dig a little deeper into that.
Yeah, what comes to mind is, if there's this old question, what are you going to be doing in 5 years and 10 years? I'm like, I don't know. How would I know that? I mean, sure, have some plans, but you can't see with great clarity what you're going to be doing 3 steps down the road until you get this step and you go, oh, I'm starting to see with this skill set here that I developed, that opens up a door for me to do this stuff, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Karate Kid, like, why am I waxing this car for hours and hours?
Yeah.
Well, it's because you're developing a skill set. You don't know how you're going to use that in the future. But when you get there, you'll be so glad that you have it, and you'll see with greater clarity
Mm-hmm.
what that next step is. So I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers your question, but that's what comes to mind.
It does, and it's so. I shared this, the Karate Kid movie with my son not too long ago, actually, and formative for myself. Born in '78, I like cut my teeth in all these like coming of age stories. But one thing to on that example, when Daniel was first in Mr. Miyagi's parking lot or in front of his house, he saw that car and he really was like, "Wow, that's a cool car." And so that his heart was attracted to it immediately. But then it became an object of his disdain because he had to work on it. And it was just like, oh, I don't know, I hate this, I hate this. Now he did like it originally, but now because of all the work, it's like, oh, this is terrible. But then, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, he gets gifted this
Yeah.
car. So he inherits the hard work, even though he kind of threw a lot of shade on it. He was like, I don't like this. It kind of feels like that whole anything worth doing is going to be kind of difficult to do. So you go through these peaks and valleys of like hating it and loving
Totally.
it. I guess it makes it more satisfying when you get to the end.
Oh, and this is the way, life is put together in so many ways. Like I mentioned earlier, my wife's a birth doula, so she's helped something like 300 people have babies, and
Wow.
we watched this over and over. Of course, having 4 of our own, man, going through that pregnancy, by the time you get to where you're, ready to have that baby, you're sick of being pregnant. You're like, I am tired of being. At first, you're like, hey, we're pregnant, we're having a baby. By 8.5 months, you're like, I am done with this. And that feeling happens just in time for that baby to be ready to be born, which is another kind of traumatic, can be a kind of a traumatic experience. But you're ready for it because you're so ready to move on. Like you said, that object of disdain prepares you to move into this next thing, which is also going to be hard, but you're ready to move into it,
That's great. And so now, looking into um, these past years and all of these different chapters of the business, what kind of advice would you give to people out there who they have a feeling that what they're doing right now needs to have a little bit of simplicity applied, while at the same time they're dreading maybe the complexity of what applying simplicity looks like in their business. The extra work of figuring out the delegation and everything else, it starts to feel more complicated than simple. But it's in the pursuit of this idea, um, at least to be more thoroughly aligned with your own values. Talk to them about maybe some next steps and encouragements that will get them through these phases to maybe a more a peaceful end, or a good place beyond the initial hard work.
Yeah, so there's a million, practical things that you could do that, not all of them will apply to every situation, but here's one that applies universally: curiosity. The mindset of the curious person is so far more helpful than the mindset of the certain person. Certainty keeps you in your box where you're at. I know this, and this is, how it is. Curiosity, I wonder what's over there, drives you. And it doesn't mean that the answer every time is like, I wonder what's over there, is you should go over there and get it. But you find those places to kind of go those next concentric circles of living your values by being curious. And that applies to everything from how do we, I wonder what happens if we change our brew ratio on this particular coffee,
Yeah.
to I wonder what happens if we um, enroll our kids in this particular program. I wonder what that would be like. So I just really encourage everybody to cultivate a mentality and a mindset of curiosity. That's what drives you to that next thing.
Yeah, and I like that you brought up curiosity, because it means you're a student of the very thing that you're doing. So certainty doesn't necessarily mean success. And maybe it could mean the opposite of success, because you're not going to allow for opportunities of things that might be better for you, better for your team, better for your business. So having that curiosity is a great way to sort of round this conversation off. And you've written and had all these other people help you write such a great story with your business. And it's been wonderful to have you in the cohort, the class of 2023, I
Yeah.
suppose. Yeah. And so I really appreciate your wisdom and all that you share to help others as well in your experience, which is the great benefit of community in general, is that you get to receive, but you also get to give. And that's true of business and communities. So, Don, thank you again. And where can people learn more about Story?
It's storycoffeecompany.com. All of the shorter versions of that were taken when we opened. So it's the whole long thing. But yeah, storycoffeecompany.com, or find us on the social medias. That's Story Coffee Company.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, Don. Thank you.
Hey, it was a treat to be here, Chris. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for all of the work you do with Keys to the Shop and the cohorts and the key holders group. It's very, very much appreciated.
Okay, so what did you think? What do you think about the story of Story Coffee Company? I think there's a ton of insights that Don shared here, not the least of which is the idea that it's not necessarily about saying no to things, it's about what you will absolutely say yes to. I like that turn, that idea that we're not focused on the negative of what we don't want, but we're saying what do we want? In getting down to that why, that classic question that can sometimes be a trite thing to say these days. And unfortunately, it's a very important thing to pursue. But if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, start with why, um, the success of that phrase, it sort of, uh, is it oversaturated? Unfortunately, maybe, but boy, it really is something that you need to get over if you're tired of the phrase and actually practice it, because that's the kind of thing that has really shaped what Don and his wife and his team have accomplished with Story. And the satisfaction in knowing that what you're pursuing is not out of the fear of missing out and not out of the pursuit of more just for the sake of more, but for the pursuit of something greater, that the values guide what you do and what you say yes to is huge. It's huge. So a lot of other great things shared by Don. And I told you in the beginning, Don has a lot of wonderful insights, and it was such a pleasure to have him in that inaugural coaching group, that keyholder coaching group. So, Don, thank you. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for Story Coffee Company and how you're still writing that story. We appreciate everything. So, if you're interested in learning more about Story Coffee Company, go to storycoffeecompany.com. Also, look them up on Instagram, and just when you're in Colorado Springs, check them out. Great stuff there. So, if you want to reach out to me with any questions, comments, or feedback, if you're interested in keyholder coaching groups and want to be considered for the next round of groups that's coming up in the beginning of September, then reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. And I think I'll use this as a bit of a, I didn't actually plan this, but I would love for keyholder coaching groups to start a managers coaching group. Been kind of hemming and hawing around this, but there have been many managers who have reached out to me, and the group itself is for owners only. And I, want to also include other leaders. And so I think the answer is let's do a keyholder coaching group for managers. And so if that's interesting to you, if you're a manager, reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. And this might be something that your boss, the owner of the coffee shop, can help you with in terms of investment to become a member of this group, because it is a paid group. But it is a worthwhile investment, because community in leadership creates better leadership, both for owners and for managers. So you heard it here first. Before we post it on Instagram or anything like that, if you're a manager, this is something we're going to launch. I'm just literally now deciding in tandem with the keyholder coaching group coming up for owners. So reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. So that's the end of our show. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate all of you, as always, and I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.